They've been in the dark for so long it won't bother them.
That's right. They won't notice.
Some of it's mine.
Should we get rolling here?
You certainly can.
All right.
Right on the button.
We're going to go ahead and get started. Welcome this morning to our City Council workshop for Monday, May 9th. We've got some responses to some previous council questions. So, Mr. Manager, why don't you quickly answer those for us?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. There is a letter in your packet dated May 9. It outlines questions and responses. 3 of these have to do with subjects or questions that deal with workshops that we're scheduling for the near future. The first 2 questions have to do with city parkland. We've got a proposal or a workshop being prepared that will come to you in later this spring. The next question, same way, it's on safety policy that we have for our employees, and it's dealing also with workers' compensation. That workshop is being prepared right now. We should have to you in June. Third question has to do with the blank par zoo agreement. You ask about the anticipated schedule for the expenditures, and if you see attached on the 3rd page is a schedule of the dates, the expense that would be incurred in the city's contribution towards that. You see our total is $8.1 million as per your contract over the period of 4 years. Next question had to do with the Drake Law class presentation. As with the first 2, we're preparing a workshop on this item, and we'll have something back to you in June. And then the last question on Botanical Center agreement, how will the possible gap funding and staffing be handled if the foundation is not ready to take over when the Waterworks agreement ends? We've had conversation with the folks at Waterworks. They're willing to extend their agreement by 1 year, which would then fill that gap period if that should be necessary. Mr. Mayor and Council, those are the questions and responses.
Does anybody have any follow-ups? Seeing none, let's go ahead and move on with the Bravo of Greater Des Moines 2080 update.
Mr. Mayor, I think we're going to have Larry McDowell make an introduction to the overview of the agreement.
Yeah, PowerPoint presentation has been made to go through a little bit of the history of the 2080 agreement with Bravo and our current agreement. In 2005, the initial 3-year agreement with Bravo was put together and was approved by the City Council. Provide for the 2/7 contribution of our hotel motel tax revenues to Bravo. We made deducts for our contractual commitments to the Blank Park Zoo, $390,000, and our commitment to the Botanical Center of $150,000. We also made a deduction for the contributions made by the other suburban communities to the Iowa Event Center and Principal Park. We basically averaged those and made an equitable deduction for ourselves to make it the SAR contributions even with the suburbs. That was a 3-year agreement. In 2008, the City Council approved the second agreement with Bravo. Again, a 2/7 hotel motel tax proceeds contribution. We had a $209,000 contractual commitment to the zoo, which was a deduct from that. And then also Bravo committed to spend $150,000 extra to the zoo for a total $440,000 contribution to the zoo. Again, we had the deduction for the contributions to the Iowa Event Center and Principal Park. And we had a contribution which was increased to Botanical Center to $195,000. The provision which was put in 2008, which was not in 2005, was a capital campaign fund where entities could approach Bravo for the local match funding for Vision Iowa grants, CAT grants, and other federal and state grants. It's possible the entities could still come to a city council as well, but that they first come to Bravo for a share of that local match funding. The agreement, which will be on tonight's City Council agenda for consideration, again provides for the 2/7 hotel motel tax proceeds funding. Again, it will have the subsidy for the Blank Park Zoo, which again is a $290,000 plus $150,000 for the total $440,000, and that's set forth in the agreement that the council approved a couple weeks ago. The Botanical Center has the base amount $195,000, and then also with the commencement of the lease, which council I believe will consider tonight as well, with the commencement of the lease to the Botanical Center group, the amount will increase by $50,000 to a total of $245,000. Again, we have the capital campaign fund contribution, which has been tweaked somewhat to where that dollar amount won't go over $450,000. There's a commitment for Bravo to fund that up to $150,000 in any year. So at the end of fiscal year, if there's, say, $250,000, Bravo has to contribute $150,000 for the total to bring that up. If there's $350,000 in a given year, they only need to contribute $100,000 for the total $450,000. There's a thought that we want this money to go to operations, that we don't want the capital campaign fund to go too high. And I forgot to mention probably the most important thing of the new agreement is that the last 2 or 3 year terms, this will have an indefinite term. It'll have a minimum of 3 years, but it'll be subject to an 18-month termination by any city, similar to the Convention and Visitor Bureau agreement, where if a city entity decides to terminate before January 1 of any year, that will be effective July 1 of a next fiscal year following. So it allows for Bravo to budget without worrying about one city dropping out. It'll also allow an opportunity for Bravo and, well, the city to work with Bravo to try to correct the situation to hopefully go on in the future. This happened with the city of Des Moines with the Convention Visitor Bureau agreement back in the early 90s. The city withdrew. They got together. Well, the city exercised its right to terminate. The entities got together, and the city got the Convention Visitor Bureau to correct the situation, and then the city withdrew its termination and then continued on. That pretty much highlights the agreement provisions. If there are any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Anybody have anything?
I think, are you going to talk, who's going to talk about new communities coming into the Bravo agreement?
That would probably be better for
Brian and
yeah.
Brandon. Let me just add that Larry did all the drafting on the agreement and did a really great job, and I think it was a benefit to the Bravo folks and the other communities. So thanks to Larry and Jeff and the other folks in legal for doing that.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Larry.
Good morning, Mr. Mayor, Mr. City Manager, honorable members of the council. I'm Brian Lorenzo, current board president of Bravo Greater Des Moines, and with me here today is M.D. Isley, who is the executive director of Bravo Greater Des Moines. And we appreciate the opportunity to come in and talk to you about the proposed 2080 agreement or renewal of Bravo Greater Des Moines and the City of Des Moines. As Larry said, we are nearing the completion of our third year 2080 agreement. The reason we come forward with the revised agreement is we believe that Bravo has now established itself as a true regional arts council for the Greater Des Moines area. We're committed to enriching the quality of life for the area by increasing cultural awareness, advocacy, and funding of arts and cultural organizations, and as well as fostering collaboration among our cultural organizations as well as our member communities. MD will talk about some of the detailed information that we've gathered and we believe support the new 2080 agreements. One of the highlights will be the expansion of the number of communities that are involved with Bravo Greater Des Moines. In fact, I'm going out to Waukee this evening to talk to them about coming aboard, which we're excited about. But because of that, we do believe it's appropriate to enter into the perpetual agreement similar to that the cities have with the Greater Des Moines Convention and Visitors Bureau. Really, that is the major change in the agreement compared to the ones we've had for the last 6 years. We do want to thank the City of Des Moines for its leadership and its assistance in putting the agreement together the last two times. We feel and we hope that you agree that this really has become an excellent model of regional cooperation between Des Moines and the other area communities. And with that, I'm going to let MD fill you in with some details, but we will be happy to answer any questions that the council has. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, council members, thank you so much for this opportunity. MD Isley, Executive Director of Bravo, Greater Des Moines. And I thank you for the opportunity, but on behalf of the arts and cultural organizations in the Greater Des Moines area, we sincerely thank you. You know, the last several years have been rather trying economically, and I do believe, based on my knowledge and experience working with the arts and cultural organizations, that without this type of financial sustainable support, many of our organizations, or several of them, certainly would have been in financial jeopardy, to say the least. And I'm not just talking about small organizations. All of our organizations have really had to watch it closely over the last few years. So we sincerely thank you. And we thank you because not only is your support financial and sustainable, but it also recognizes what arts and cultural organizations do as far as contributing to the quality of life in the Greater Des Moines area. And here's just a few of those reasons as to why. The partnership, of course, is now 6 years old, and as Brian mentioned, has proven to be fiscally responsible, efficient, and effective, a proven way to distribute financial support, sustainable support to the arts and cultural organizations that generate significant economic impact in the region and contribute to the quality of life. What defines great communities? Often when I'm out talking about Bravo, I ask just a few questions. When you go to New York, Minneapolis, Austin, Chicago, Portland, whatever it might be, what's significant about those cities? Other than the business that you're on, why do you go there? What do you do? And what defines them as great, attractive, enticing? If you ask others in those cities, what should I see? What should I do? They're most likely to tell you to go to the museums, the theater, the symphony, the ballet, the sculpture gardens. Speaking of great communities, we have several, 13 partner municipalities to date, with Polk City coming in as the 13th on July 1st. And here are those cities that, of course, most of you folks are already very aware of. We're pleased to say that several organizations, or cities, have joined us in the last couple of years, as well as the original charter municipalities.
And MD, could you just share with the group if they just come in and they don't have a hotel, all that stuff?
Sure. We have an agreement with them that they contribute at minimum $1,000 annually, with the understanding that if and when a hotel does come online, that automatically 2/7 of that revenue would come to Bravo Greater Des Moines. We have several cities that are very excited about this. Just in the last couple of months, I've heard from Prairie City and a couple of other smaller communities wanting to know, recognizing, of course, that they don't have hotel motel tax revenue and don't necessarily expect to receive a financial benefit, but they recognize and value the work that this Regional Arts Council is doing and somehow would like to be part of that as well. So we're excited to be receiving those types of calls also. So why is your support so critical? Obviously, if you look here, you can see that charitable contributions in 2009 were ranked nationally in this order. Notice that arts, cultural, and humanities ranked fairly low. Of all charitable contributions made nationally in 2009, only 4% of all contributions went to arts, culture, and heritage organizations. So this type of support is critical. Regarding funding, here are the awards to date, beginning in FY05. And we're pleased to say, of course, that to date, we've awarded over $14 million, thanks to support from Des Moines and, of course, the other communities. I have to emphasize that just a little bit. Bravo organizations, of the 83 organizations, and most of these organizations are organizations that have applied for funding, and most of them have received funding at one time. Currently, our roster is at 85. On an annual basis, we fund just about 60 organizations. Of those all organizations, the 83, 70% of those Bravo organizations that we designate as a Bravo organization are based in Des Moines. 58 out of the 83. And going further with that, we have Block 1 organizations. These are our largest organizations, of which we currently have 16. These organizations that typically have an operating budget of at least $1 million or close to it and serve more than 10,000 visitors per year or have 10,000 in membership. Of those organizations, 85% of all available funding goes to the Block 1 organizations. So 85% of the funding that we have available on an annual basis goes to the top 16 organizations. Of the top 16 organizations, 14 of those are located in or within the city limits of Des Moines. We have a community that, of course, is being recognized by outsiders as a community to watch when it comes to arts and culture development, grassroots activity, a community that makes Greater Des Moines more attractive to businesses and potential visitors and employees, of course, and a community that contributes significantly and directly to the local economy. We're also very excited to announce that we're very near the completion of a cultural plan. This has been a 2-year project, a comprehensive community cultural plan that will help us lead the effort from the arts and cultural sector in the Greater Des Moines area to plan for our future. We're also pleased to say that this planning effort has now been incorporated into the Capital Crossroads visioning effort. The goals of this plan, and I'll just mention them real quickly, are to connect community and culture, engage locally, work collaboratively, and build capacity within the organizations. The Community Cultural Plan also conducted quite a bit of research last year. Of that was a customer data file analysis. From that information, we determined that the top users, purchasers from a community perspective of arts and cultural services in the Greater Des Moines area was coming in number 1, Ankeny, number 2, Urbandale, number 3, West Des Moines, number 4, Johnston, number 5, Clive, number 6, Waukee, 7, Des Moines, and the top 8, rounding it out, come in at Polk City. So we obviously have a diverse group of municipalities that certainly value and take advantage of the arts and cultural services that we have in the area. So oftentimes, when I'm out speaking about Bravo Greater Des Moines, people ask what they can do, how we can support. Here's just a list of common ways we encourage folks to attend and participate, to volunteer, share resources, etc., on behalf of or to support the arts and cultural organizations. And of course, most importantly, because it is part of their structure, to provide financial support. Regarding your financial support, obviously, it benefits, or the organizations benefit directly from the hotel motel tax revenue, and of course, in turn, generate revenue themselves, which of course benefits all of us, and by additional activity in the area when visitors come, etc. We're working hard to support, strengthen, and grow our arts and cultural sector, and provide financial support in an efficient and effective manner, and relieving municipalities of the responsibility to address individual requests, or at least a majority of those requests. So we thank you very much and greatly appreciate your ongoing support of Bravo Greater Des Moines. We really, really do, on behalf of the arts and cultural sector especially.
MD, maybe you could just summarize for the council those communities that have already approved the 2080 agreement?
Certainly. West Des Moines, Urbandale. I don't have my list in front of me. Clive is very close. Johnston, Indianola, Norwalk to date. So we're moving rather aggressively right now and hope to have the majority of those done within the next couple of weeks.
And so the timeline is that this would be approved so that it would be effective July 1st?
Correct. Correct. Thank you.
All right, any other questions?
AMD, we've got a group here in Des Moines that's struggling. It's been all over the news, the Isissarettes. How would they apply through you for funding?
And actually, I've caught the Isissarettes a couple of times after a couple of their performances and have encouraged them to apply. To date, they've not yet applied for funding, but knowing that that is still an issue, I will reach out to them again and make sure that, that we get an application in as soon as possible. It's a wonderful group.
All right, anything else?
Thank you, folks.
Thank you. Let's move on to mosquito control. This has been an issue on and off before the council over the last number of years.
Good morning, Mayor and Council. Phil Delafield, Community Development Director. This morning, backed by popular demand, mosquito control. There's some changing elements here, so we thought we'd run through it really quick, just give you a background. we've laid out the historical perspective here. There's been some changes in the law that regulate how local organizations such as ours would react to the application of pesticides in the area. All of this to say is that there are new rules that are in place beginning March 30th in Iowa, and new law effective July 30th elsewhere. The prime issue here is to minimize pollutants to the waterway. That's what we're trying to do. That's the information that we're trying to get out. So we are reducing or eliminating discharges, exposure to the waters, and we're trying to use the best available practices that are practical and achievable. So the impact that's on the City of Des Moines mosquito control program, we have 4 components that are a part of our efforts: standing water complaint, aerial and ground pre-hatch, encephalitis monitoring, and the spray trucks, the adult mosquito control. All programs, all components of our program will be maintained. The changes that we're doing will be initiated when we have action thresholds that are reached. Action thresholds are established locally. We'll maintain all of our program components, but we will apply our resources only when those action thresholds are hit. So what is an action threshold? It's a target population for mosquito density. You see our frog here. That is not a mosquito. That's a spider, complements of community development, light, and magic. An action threshold is a target for mosquito population density that, when reached, may trigger the application of pesticides for mosquitoes. There's language in the general permit number 7 that allow us to establish those thresholds. We've used 10 years worth of data to reach our conclusion. So in the blue, you'll see the mosquito population counts for the average. Those are averages for the years 2001 through 2010. And then in the lighter blue in front of it, you see the complaint averages for 2001 and 2010. Across the bottom, you see the months and the weeks of the year. So you can see early May, late May, June, we tend to have a high number of complaints and a high count of mosquitoes. And then as the year wears on, we evidently have a tolerance for the mosquitoes. The complaints go down while we still have some high amounts of mosquitoes in our trapping system. So what we've done is establish the thresholds based on this data. Our trapping districts, we have traps that we set around the city, and we use that to monitor the mosquito counts. This is, you can see that we have Area 1 up in the Beaverdale area, Area 2 up in the north area, Highland Park area, Area 3 is in the east, and so on. So these areas all have traps that are monitored by our staff. This is the new technology that we're using. This is thanks again to our IT folks and our GIS folks. This is quite amazing. This is the call density for 2010, and you can see there that we have are able to isolate and react to specific areas with high counts. So again, I want to reflect on why we're doing this. The impetus here is to have both clean water, safe water, and to address the discomfort and diseases that can be transmitted through the mosquitoes. So we are applying our resources strategically based on a threshold action level and based on the call density. Want to reflect a little bit on some of the sort of hot spots that you see here, because we are also taking into account the location of Des Moines Waterworks in our application efforts. And you'll notice there is quite a large call density in that north of the Raccoon area, south of the Raccoon area, which is where Waterworks is located. So we have worked with Waterworks to establish a protocol for application of larvicide or spray materials in those areas. The materials that we use are really rather innocuous, but they are present and they are concerns. So we notify Waterworks when the application is pending. We try to gauge our response based on the weather patterns, and we give them a heads up that it's coming. You'll notice that there are high counts near the Raccoon River area. There are not as many intense areas up in the in the Des Moines River area, and we have historically placed larvicide early in the season up there, and it shows in our application. So we are going to now try to marshal our resources a little bit more strategically when we apply in the raccoon area, and try to see if we can have some impact on those,
Bill, before
those
you go on,
issues.
the point you made about the waterworks, because it's the source of water for human consumption, there are some constraints in terms of how you apply your chemicals in those areas, and
Yes.
constrain how you do what you do.
Well, because the water is taken from the horizontal galleries of the waterworks there, we want to make sure that the waterworks is aware, that their chemists on staff are aware of the materials coming through so that they can watch for them. They then, in turn, have the ability to switch the intake to the Des Moines River and take water from a source that is not having the pesticides applied in that area if it should surface. Okay? Just to run on just a little bit longer here, this is the 2010 weekly trap counts. And on the left column in the weeks there, you see some of those items are in red. Those are the weeks that we would have reached the application thresholds and applied it if we had done it in 2010. Similar data here for 2009, which was a low year. And you can see the line items in red were much, much less. There are some rules that apply to large applicators and small applicators. We can't really tell for sure which we will be. Some years we may apply pesticides to large acreages. Some years we may apply it to small acreages. The point is, for us, we are managing our system based on the fact that we could potentially be a large applicator, and we will manage our system based on that. So there are some issues with chemical applications not happening early on. The public may not notice the early applications of the pesticides, the hand distribution of the pesticides. They will see the helicopters. Matter of fact, we will have a drop later today, the first application of pesticide.
And where will that be?
That'll be north of the Des Moines River, Jack? Yes. We have a system to monitor for the encephalitis and diseases. One of the concerns is that the labs don't, at Iowa State University, we partner with Iowa State University, and those labs don't open until June, but we have the capacity to monitor, to monitor up until they open up. We also have, I mentioned we have traps set up throughout the city. There's a potential for trap malfunction or vandalism or a trap compromise. We have alternate traps that are available to resort to should that occur. And again, we are managing all of our program components. So we're doing the same things that we've done in the past. We're just marshaling our resources once we hit those action thresholds. The new operating plan then will be in full compliance with the new rules. Those include the CDC, the Center for Disease Control, and the State Health Department. We will reduce our pesticide exposure to the general public. We'll lower our program costs, potentially. And we will have the ability to take some of our labor hours and move those personnel to the more effective larvicide hand application to standing water. And we will have more direct and timely response to citizens' complaints. So when we have those mapped areas of high calls, we can send the trucks out to those areas. And then we also have the ability to, for the public, those who have health issues or reasons where they do not want to have the pesticide applied on their street, they can call us up, let us know of those concerns, and we have the ability to say we will not spray on that street.
Could you go and talk a little bit more about that, Phil? If a family has allergies or problems with the spray, is it the whole street or is it within, because then you get calls from other
People up and down the street
that want the spray.
We avoid that street, Jack. What's the dimension that we would use? That we would run the whole street if somebody wants to?
It depends on the actual location of the house. Typically, we try to stay in a block either side.
Okay. And so if they want to register that they don't want spray, can they do that via the web page? Can they go just in and do it via the web page?
Yes, they can. Do it by web or telephone as well.
Okay, thank you.
Contact our office and we'll take care of that. So then just to reiterate, the action thresholds for us will provide a credible response to the potential questions from the EPA, the Iowa Department of Natural Resources, or environmental groups. What are you doing to reduce pesticide applications as required by General Permit Number 7? The action thresholds will be reviewed at the conclusion of the year, and we can adjust them up or down as is necessary. And the use of the surveillance data and action thresholds, particularly as it relates to the adult mosquito control, has long been recommended by the CDC. So we're doing what they ask us to do. And it's really important to recognize we can't eliminate the mosquitoes, but we can utilize our resources effectively to reduce their numbers and mitigate the effects. Any other questions?
Phil, what's effective life of some of these chemicals? I suppose they vary with the different chemicals that you use, but I just wonder how long they're effective.
Jack Hansen is our resident expert on that one. Jack, would you take that question?
Jack Hansen, Neighborhood Inspection. The chemical life, active ingredient life of our adulticide is 24 hours in sunlight. It'll degrade. The active ingredient in the spray.
Yeah. Then they kind of fall off after that, or are they no more effective after the 24-hour period?
There's no residual control at all
Okay.
with the adulticide that we use.
Thank you.
The adulticide is the spray.
Is the spray.
Yeah.
Anything else?
Thank you.
Thank you. Let's move on to manufactured home parks in Des Moines. Through the years, we've had a number of conversations about activities going on in and around, and unfortunate experiences, fires to junk and debris. So,
Mayor, Council, Sue Donovan, Zoning Enforcement Officer for the City of Des Moines. Going through real quickly for you sort of our enforcement options on manufactured homes. We have current and ongoing activities regarding compliance in the mobile home parks, ongoing junk and debris, inspections and notices and cleanups, and then a continued ongoing rental and public nuisance inspections of the dwelling units themselves. The problems that we're seeing in the manufactured home park are crowding, created by loss of setback separation, construction of additions and accessory structures to the units themselves, deterioration of the units, creating safety hazards. A lot of these parks were built and at the time when there were smaller mobile homes. We've now seen double wides and other homes moving into the parks, which creates some of the crowding and setback problems. Some of the zoning questions that would need to be answered preliminary are what were the setbacks from the streets, alleys, and adjoining properties when the mobile home park was constructed? What was the separation between units? How many units were in the park? How many should be in the park to allow the adequate separation? And then the bigger question is, how do we achieve compliance with standards? Some of the building questions are similar. What would be the required separation between the units for fire safety concerns? What work has occurred in the parks? What permits should have been pulled or would need to be pulled? And again, how do we achieve compliance regarding renovation of units, additions, and the like that have gone on over the years? All manufactured homes are subject to HUD requirements as of 1976, and that is the requirements for how the mobile home is constructed as it comes off of the manufacturing. It doesn't have anything to do with local ordinances. That sort of supersedes us. But any repairs to electrical, plumbing, mechanical, or the structure after the manufacture and they're within the jurisdiction can be subject to local permits. Again, the additions and the accessory structures can be handled by our permit process also. Just to kind of go through quick aerials, which is one of the the ways that we will look at to achieve our baseline of what zoning requirements were in effect. We'll kind of run through Oak Hill, for instance. This is a 1947 aerial. You can see that the entrance to the mobile home park is off of Park Avenue, and there's a scattering of homes. Move to 1963, and you see that the entrance to the park is now moved over to Indianola. And we have more units and in a more confined, orderly fashion. You go to 2009, and you can see where the homes have pushed into the setbacks closer to the property lines. So for this one, we'd have to go through and look at when was the mobile home park built. It could have been, so it's obviously before 1947. There would be no ordinances per se, because we didn't have any ordinances until the 50s, specifically as to mobile home parks, and we'd have to see when this one was annexed in and what codes would have applied. Moving to Radio City, which is another one that we're going to look at. In 1947, we have nothing. 1963, we have the construction, so somewhere in there we'd have to look at when it went in, what ordinances would have applied. And then in 2009, we have kind of the most recent aerial. Again, back to the research, we'd have to research the history of the park, when it came in, when it was annexed in, and then determine what codes would apply. Using that analysis, then we could determine a method to calculate what setbacks we could enforce, what separation, the number of units allowed in the park, determine if the current ordinance are sufficient to achieve compliance, and then what compliance we would be able to do. We have 17 manufactured home parks in the city. Our suggestion is to start with 2, do the research, get a baseline for how we're going to handle them. It's similar to the vehicle display lot that we went through with the analysis of them and then how we achieve compliance. There would be Board of Adjustment cases, zoning cases, probably with P&Z, litigation. We'd have to factor all of that in. But this is a time-consuming project. The staff implications to take on this project, there would be a considerable amount of staff time involved simply in the zoning research to determine what levels that we can achieve. We're also currently finishing up the car lots, the junkyards, current rezoning efforts, and of course the rewrite of the zoning ordinance. So that would have to be factored into the timing. It would potentially, the increased efforts will result in a reduction in other service levels of the zoning department on a day-to-day function. We can, as a next step, work on a building code revision regarding a permit process for installation of manufactured homes so that we know what's going in and out of the parks. Maybe get some handle on what parks are moving homes in and out and what kind of oversight we can have on that process. The long-range plan is to do the analysis and report back to Council in September with specific research, make specific recommendations, and take appropriate steps as directed regarding implementation of necessary ordinance changes. At that point, beginning the discussion as necessary with any stakeholders involved in the process. Some of the maybe unlikely outcomes that we should look at is an improvement of the appearance of the current homes that are located within the lots. And we may not be able to get a full upgrade of all respects to current standards. And we may not be able to make sure that we have newer homes moved in. We'd have to look at the analysis and determine what it is that we can do. Possible outcomes, we could see a reduction in the number of units in a park, displacement of some current residents, economic hardship to the residents asked to bring the units up to code, and possible an economic impact on the park owners themselves. Questions, concerns?
Brian.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. You mentioned 17 parks in the city. Most are high quality, good, recent mobile home parks. Not the ones I think we're concerned about is the ones that were grandfathered in due to the annexations. I know I just in my head counted up 4, and I would bet that the other ones would be in Bob's ward. But I like the idea of starting with 2 one being Oak Hill and maybe Radio City, and finding out where we are with all that stuff and seeing what we can do on some of those. I have a couple other concerns. My biggest concern with this stuff is even though we had talked about it since I was on the council, we were not prepared for a transition where somebody came and said, we don't want this anymore. It's too much hassle for us to keep up. Is the city willing to buy it? And I see that we're spending like $2 million to buy the YWCA tonight, or to demolish the YWCA. I mean, there's got to be a process in place to transition some of these out of what they currently are into a redevelopment opportunity. That's my biggest concern, is being prepared for that transition. Like Fort Des Moines, which we dealt with, Sue, that you know about, the Fort Des Moines mobile home park was one where we didn't know until we looked at it that he had, I think, like 10 of those trailers in a place where they weren't supposed to be, and we gave him, I think, till 2013 to move those out and transition. Whether he can make that work or not is not to be seen, but we should have a plan in place to transition some of these out in a way that helps the residents and a way that helps the developer that would be coming in. Secondly, that under the Iowa Code, I do not believe that these are considered homes, that they're considered vehicles. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay.
They're taxed entitled as vehicles.
Taxed entitled as vehicles, yet I see a lot of them being sold on contract. And the question for Jeff Lester is that legal? Can they do that as a home? They're selling them as homes on contract. In fact, if you drive down 14th Street, there's a big sign that says, buy your home on contract here. And so that's another question I had.
And we did get a determination from legal on that, so we're headed down that path of contracts aren't the way to transfer.
Contracts are not legal then on those vehicles. And just going back to the transition, and I think you stated it earlier in some of this, is that a lot of these smaller mobile homes, when they came in, it looks like Oak Hill in the 40s and 50s before the city annexed down there, that they are substantially smaller than the ones that would currently be coming in, and then what the effect is on that, trying to, if one's gone, transitioning one in, even if they're not double wides, even if they're the smaller ones. The small ones today are larger than the small ones 50 years ago.
Correct.
And so we have to figure that out. But my biggest concern is obviously safety, the current, I mean, you know, the one at Oak Hill, I get a lot of calls about, can't you do something? Is this up to code? And you have to explain this as a transition that they were grandfathered in. But, you know, just from a safety standpoint, I'm concerned, and I'd like to see some transition plan. If somebody comes to us and says, if he comes and says, I'm done, I don't want the Oak Hill Park anymore, can we transition folks out of there in 3 years, in 5 years, in 7 years, and say this is no longer the best use for this property and rezone appropriately? That's my concern. Does that make any sense?
Mr. Mayor, council members, I'd like to make a couple comments. I think your points are really good. The reason this is on your agenda today, I think, is because of the concerns that this council has had about some of the old manufactured homes or mobile home parks in the city. And the presentation here that Sue has given is, in my mind, a really major departure from how we've approached these facilities in the past. And she's outlined what may not sound like an aggressive program, but is in fact quite different and quite aggressive. It would lead us to a different approach in terms of how we've managed these. Mr. Meyer, your point, I think, is a great one. We have purchased one mobile home park, I think, off of Southeast 14th Street.
4315.
There we had, I think, a willing seller. Whether or not we could get to a point where we could mandate it, I doubt. But I think your point is, when the opportunity presents itself, can we do certain things to enable that park to be transitioned to another use and redeveloped for a different use entirely? I think that's just something we're going to have to watch. The process that Sue has outlined doesn't necessarily get you there. I mean, it's all about making zoning compliance and getting them to meet certain minimum standards. which don't happen to be our standards. But it may not get us there. I think the effort you're talking about to transition from one use to another suggests additional strategies, not necessarily contrary ones, but different strategies about how we could have funds available, and then when those opportunities present themselves, be able to buy
And
them.
I understand the limitations that Sue's under. I get that. But it seems like we were caught flat-footed, and in situations in Bob's ward, we were able to use some flood money to transition people out. But at 4315, it seems like even though I'd been talking about it for 2 or 3 years at that point, 4315 Southeast 14th Street, the woman came to me and said, I don't want this anymore. Would you like to redevelop it as a city? And we didn't have a plan. And so I'd like to have a plan that says, you know, it's a double-pronged approach. We have the enforcement, but we also have, if somebody comes and says, look, my park's deteriorated, you know, I don't want to just, I can't run it anymore, and which is what happened on 14th Street. She came and said, it's not, I'm not making money off of it. I cannot put new ones in because everything's eroded and gone. If we hadn't stepped in, there was the opportunity for somebody to come in and run it again for another 30 years as it is. But we stepped in. We said we don't want this use here anymore, and we were able to transition people on. I'd like to see us be prepared for that in the instance of somebody coming to us. But I also like the ideas of the enforcement, especially on the one at Park in Indianola, which is Oak Hill, I think. So,
Mr. Mayor.
Wait.
Excellent information, Sue Ann. I really appreciate it. I guess where I'm at is I think that we need to be very aggressive in this. I think it's deplorable, the conditions that some of the people are required to live in. I think that the owners have responsibility as well, and they need to be held accountable for taking the profits and really driving them into the ground, I think, in some situations, not all. But I would like to see, when you come back to the council, information as to how the owners will be held accountable, and if they don't meet a certain level of criteria, after we go through this process, then this will be step 2, step 3, so that they're not allowed to continue operating in that fashion. And then the issue of contracts, and I know we've had discussions about this at the council table before. How are they paying property taxes? I know that we've had major debate about that. They don't pay property taxes based upon residential, correct?
The mobile home park owner that owns the land pays property taxes. The person who buys the unit, the mobile home unit, pays taxes as a vehicle.
Okay.
So there's 2 different taxing.
So the mobile home park is taxed as a commercial?
I believe so, yes.
But it's
Do you have to buy a license for this thing? Since it's a vehicle?
Yes, they have a license, they have a
So
title.
That's the equivalent of the tax, correct?
Right.
Yeah.
They have to title it. And that's something that we'll get into in our research is which ones are titled correctly and which ones aren't, and which ones have taxes owed against them. That's the level of detail we'll have to get
Who
into.
does that license
It's
fee go
issued to
to?
the title holder of the,
DOT, though? Does it go to the DOT?
I believe it's through DOT, and then
Right.
Polk County has their records.
So the city doesn't get any money out of that part of it at all?
I don't believe so.
So they are taxed quite differently than normal real estate, and I think
Yes.
that was really at the base
Yeah.
of your point.
Right.
And this has been an issue for as long as I've been here, in terms of, I guess, some would say, a disequity between how you tax.
Well, and so there's a lot of value in some of these homes anymore, and they kind of skirt that value by just putting it, it's like a bare piece of ground with a little bit of utility on it, and so the property owner pays for that part, and the value is not recognized as real estate.
And I
so
can learn more about
we-
that when I go through the analysis is how the county and state are taxing the land versus other commercial.
I have a real problem, too, with them being considered vehicles. I suspect that if you tried to move some of these that were from the 50s or 60s, they would just fall apart. And you cannot move some of these. And so, basically they have vehicles sitting on their property that aren't moving or able to move.
The life expectancy of a mobile home unit is 30 years, so you're probably correct that some of these are to the point where
outlived that.
they're not roadworthy. They couldn't move.
Can you
so.
also include in your information that comes back the number of police and fire calls on these 2?
Certainly.
Because I'm guessing that the use of services is high.
Certainly can do that, yes.
based upon.
I know Radio City is very high.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is the idea then to start with Oak Hill and Radio City?
Correct.
Okay. I like that idea. Those are probably the two big
Yeah.
ones.
This is a really significant initiative, and I thank Sue and Phil and others on their staff for putting it together, but it's in response to discussion you had here around this table. It'll be quite a departure from how we've done
But I
business
also
on this.
heard as part of the amount of time and effort for this focus, it will take time, staff away from.
It's going to be a very considerable staff effort to put all this work together, and it's going to impact other workload.
But at the end of the day, we have to figure out how they pay appropriately for the services that are delivered there.
Yeah.
And I don't think it's getting accomplished
No.
through the process
Under the
we
current
have.
system.
So at the end, maybe we need to go up on the hill and get some adjustment in how they handle and view vehicles that never move and people live in.
We
Mayor-
have had that discussion before, I can tell.
Yeah, I know at Radio City, there's a lot of young kids in that there too, and, and school tax, are not being paid properly.
Mayor, Member of Council, Alan McKinley, Deputy City Manager. We'll certainly put together a schedule of how manufactured homes are taxed. My general recollection is it is based on a square footage basis, and the numbers I tend to remember is somewhere around 15 cents, but it's also on a declining schedule based on the age of the manufactured home.
And go up, then the older it gets.
There you go.
Depreciation.
Our,
It's just the opposite.
my recollection is our revenue stream for all manufactured homes, that's not the land, but the structures, is somewhere in the $70,000 per year range.
All of them in the city.
All of them.
And we had 17 or 19, and you've got an average of how many units there, so you can figure out you're not getting much.
But we can put together a report on that.
You're not getting much.
One other, did you talk about it? I think that a key component would be, key player, stakeholder would be the Polk County Housing Trust Fund, because of the role that they played and some of the assistance that they provided as we dealt with the mobile home park over on Southeast 14th.
That's a
4315.
Yeah.
It's a great point to reach out to NFC. I think NDC would be another entity that's sort of getting to Brian's theme about trying to figure out ways to transition some of these uses from what they are to something better. NDC might play a role there as well.
Sue, what's the trend? Are we still having manufactured home parks go into service? I know back when we were on plan and zoning, Frank, remember we had a real issue on R5 and things of that nature, tried to put in some requirements that make them try to upgrade what their properties were.
We haven't had any new applications for the R5 district recently. But that certainly is a standard to look at as we go forward, is how we can maybe get some of that in place in some of these lots. But that's one of the things we're looking at long range.
So wasn't there a mobile home park built down off of Indianola Road?
Right, that was probably an R5 plan.
70s maybe,
Yeah.
early 80s. Most recent one.
Thank you.
Thanks. Any other questions anybody has on the council? If not, why don't we open it up for public comment and/or discussion? Anybody in the audience have any questions, comments, ideas, thoughts, updates? Seeing none, thank you all. We'll see those interested at City Council tonight, and staff, I'm sure you're excited about being there tonight. This meeting's adjourned.